What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be revisiting the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE and going over whether or not this is still a good phone to buy in late 2022. Now, before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, and if you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So in case you don't know, this is essentially Samsung's entry-level flagship phone, giving us the performance of a higher-end device, as well as a lot of the features, while still being relatively affordable. With this phone, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz dynamic AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 411, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 85.3% screen-to-body ratio. In general, despite not being the largest display out there, definitely not nearly as large as the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra for example, I still would say it's decently large, or at least large enough to give you a good experience when you're consuming content. In addition to this, the dynamic AMOLED display is giving us some real nice looking colors, and the viewing angles are really good as well, so if you're outside in the sun for example, this phone is still going to be really easy to see. With the 1080p resolution, of course, the image is nice and sharp, and with the 120Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a lot faster and smoother. So if you're doing something like watching videos for example, you're going to get a much nicer experience than say a standard 60Hz display, and using the phone in general is going to feel a little bit more premium. So overall, while on one hand there are plenty of mid-range phones that also have really good displays, with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, while again, the size and dimensions aren't really anything super impressive, the image quality is definitely on a whole different level, and it really does give you more of a premium experience. Now the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE has 128GB of internal storage, but keep in mind, unfortunately, there's no microSD card expansion here. That is one of the drawbacks of having a higher end device like this, because unfortunately in this day and age, flagship phones just don't have microSD card expansion. And this is definitely nothing unique, because other entry level flagship phones like the Google Pixel 6a and the iPhone SE also don't have microSD card expansion. So if you do have a lot of photos and videos for example, this might be a bit of a drawback. But keep in mind, unlike something like the Google Pixel 6a, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE also does have another variant that has 256GB. So if you really want more storage than this, then you can spend just a little bit more and get it. But that being said, honestly, for the average user, I feel like 128GB should be perfectly fine, and you're most likely not going to have any issues. Now for security features, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does have Face Unlock, and it also has a fingerprint scanner right here in the display, so definitely real nice and premium looking, as I would expect from a phone in this price range. But let's go ahead and give it a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And I do want to point out, it is nice to see this phone has both a fingerprint scanner and Face Unlock, because while compared to the average mid-range phone, this is really nothing new at all. For an entry-level flagship phone, comparing this phone to something like the iPhone SE or the Google Pixel 6a, this is actually the only one of the three that has both a fingerprint scanner and Face Unlock. For whatever reason, the others don't. So if that is something that matters to you, definitely keep this in mind. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, we got a nice looking hole punch front-facing camera. This camera is 32 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 12 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. So as far as features go, this phone has pretty much everything. There's no dedicated macro camera, but honestly, compared to every other entry level flagship phone, and even most normal flagship phones for that matter, this is really nothing unusual. Most of the higher end devices don't have macro cameras, because with a telephoto lens, you can pretty much get the exact same effect. So even if you do want to get close up detailed images with the S21 FE, this is really not going to be a problem. But again, as far as features go, this phone has pretty much everything. The ultra wide camera is real high quality, and when it comes to photo quality in general, the S21 FE definitely takes really good pictures. That being said, sure, on one hand, there are of course plenty of mid-range phones that have great cameras, but compared to those phones, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is definitely in a completely different level. With this phone, even though there is still a small handful of phones that do have better cameras, in general, if you're really into mobile photography and you want to take some seriously good photos, then the S21 FE will definitely get the job done. In addition to this, for video, this phone has a max recording quality of 4K at 60 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras, and while on one hand, some of the higher end Samsung Galaxy A series phones can also record in 4K. With those phones, the frame rate does max out at 30 frames per second, whereas again, with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, you can actually record at 60. When it comes to the video quality in general, no matter what resolution you're using, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to get great video quality. In fact, for that matter, keep in mind, I've recorded most of the videos on this channel in 2022 with this phone, and I would say they have been turning out pretty well. In fact, I'm actually using my iPhone 13 to record this exact video, and personally, when it comes to video quality, I kind of prefer the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE a little bit better, and that's actually saying a lot because technically the iPhone 13 is a little bit higher end than this phone. So the bottom line here is, if you're really taking a lot of photos, recording a lot of videos, and you want a great quality camera, but you don't want to spend $1,400 on an S22 Ultra, then the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is a great alternative. Now, when it comes to RAM and processor, with this phone, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 5G processor. As far as the overall performance goes, this phone is really good. Honestly, I've done pretty much everything there is to do with a smartphone with this phone, and it's handled everything really well. I haven't had any performance issues whatsoever, from stuff like mobile gaming to more simple things like browsing the web, using social media. I mean, I've spent hours and hours on this phone recording 4K videos, and despite maybe getting a little bit hot after recording for 6 hours straight, in general, it's handled everything I've done with it pretty easily. So if you are looking for a phone that really has that flagship kind of performance, but again, you still want something relatively affordable, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be a great choice. And I can honestly say, compared to any mid-range phone, including the Samsung Galaxy A73 5G, while a few of the higher end ones do come a little bit closer, this phone still has better performance than all of them. Now that being said, I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on it, and here are the scores I got. What I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone will be an upgrade for you. Because depending on what you're coming from, it may or may not be. I mean, if you're coming from a really low-end phone, or for that matter, pretty much any mid-range phone, then chances are this phone will be a significant upgrade. But if you're coming from an older flagship phone, depending on what it is, then it might be a little bit closer. But again, in general, if you are looking for a phone with really good performance, I feel like for most people, this phone's going to have more than enough power to get the job done. Now, this phone has a 4500 mAh battery that supports 25-watt fast charging, so in general, pretty good here. Not quite as big as an A-series phone that has a 5000 mAh battery, but honestly, it's pretty close. And in my experience, the battery life has been really good on this phone. I mean, I've done all kinds of things with it, from traveling to just using it all day to record videos, and I've had no issues at all. And when it comes to charging speeds, even though 25-watt fast charging still isn't really the best fast charging in the world, it still is pretty good, and for most people, it will absolutely get the job done. In addition to this, keep in mind, this phone does have wireless charging, so if you do like to use that feature, definitely keep this in mind. Now, as far as the software goes, as of the recording of this video, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does have Android 12, but it will be getting Android 13 real soon, and with Samsung software support, you can expect to get several other major updates as well. So if having the newest version of Android is important to you, and maybe you want to keep this same phone for a little bit longer, and you want to make sure your phone's going to be supported for as long as possible, then for a phone that's almost a year old now, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is honestly going to be one of your best options. Another thing to keep in mind here, and honestly in this price range, this kind of goes without saying, but the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, keep in mind that won't be a problem with this phone. But in conclusion, is the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE still worth buying in late 2022? Honestly, short answer, absolutely yes. But that being said, it might not make sense for everyone. On one hand, I have seen some amazing carrier deals with this phone, things that put it around the price of say a new Samsung Galaxy A53 5G or even less. I mean, someone in the comments of one of my other videos said they were getting this phone for like $250 or something like that. And if you can get this phone for that price, honestly, just get it. Because unless you get really lucky with a used older flagship phone, for that price, you're really not going to find anything better than this. That being said though, at full price or at least close to it, that's where this phone may or may not make sense for everyone. Because if you're really just using your phone for more basic activities, like browsing the web, using social media, some occasional mobile gaming, and you're taking pictures and you want things to look nice, but maybe it's really just a couple Instagram photos every now and then, keep in mind when it comes to something like social media, you're really not going to need a camera this good because social media platforms do tend to compress things anyway. So even if you have a crazy DSLR level photo on a social media platform, it's not really going to keep its original quality anyway. So that being said, if you're really just posting a couple pictures on social media, again, you don't need a camera this good. So in that kind of situation where you're really just not that much of a heavy user, more of a mid-range phone, like a Samsung Galaxy A53 5G for example, is probably going to be all you're really going to need. And with current carrier deals, those phones are probably going to be a bit more affordable. That being said though, if you're really using your phone a lot and you're just going to be on your device all day, or maybe you're taking a lot of photos, recording a lot of videos, maybe for something like YouTube for example, where you want the quality to be really good, in that kind of situation, for the money, I do think the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is honestly one of the best options. So in general, if you're looking for a phone that has more of a high-end feel to it, that's going to have a much better camera, better performance, a better display, and some better features than the average mid-range phone, then at this point in late 2022, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be a great choice. Now once again, if you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.